The cartographer's Discovery Captain Zethara pressed her six-fingered hands against the cool metal of the navigation console. Her purple skin showed stress patterns that her crew had learned to recognize over the years. The star charts spread. Before her told a story that made no sense. For 300 years, the Galactic Mapping Consortium had been the pride of civilized space. Every known species had contributed to the Great Map. The tall, tree-like Vorthok had mapped the dense star clusters of the outer rim. The crystalline Nexari had charted the dangerous nebula fields where normal ships would be destroyed. Even the tiny pipsqueaks, barely larger than a human thumb, had sent their microships into asteroid fields to map every small rock and dust cloud. But there was one section that remained blank, a small area of space marked only with the words human. Space, in basic galactic script. No trade routes went there, no diplomatic missions had ever returned from that direction. Most strange of all, no humans had ever contacted the consortium. Every other species had made first contact within decades of achieving spaceflight. The consortium's welcome protocols were well established. New species would send nervous radio, signals, then crewed ships, then formal ambassadors. It was always the same pattern, always. Except for the humans, Zethara had been studying this puzzle for months. Her research showed that humans had achieved space travel over 4 centuries. Ago, they should have made contact long before now. Yet the section of space they claimed remained as mysterious as a black hole. 3 weeks ago, she had finally convinced the Council to send a deep space probe toward the human border. The probe was equipped with the most advanced sensors in the galaxy. It could detect life signs from 50 light-years away. It could translate basic mathematics into any known language. It carried samples of the finest art, music, and literature from dozens of worlds. Today, the probe had reached its destination. Zethara stared at the readings with growing confusion. The probe had found the border of human space easily enough. There were clear signs that someone lived there. Energy readings showed massive structures, possibly cities or space stations. Heat signatures suggested billions of inhabitants. Everything pointed to a thriving civilization. But when the probe tried to make contact, something impossible happened. Nothing. Not the nothing of empty space or dead worlds. Not the nothing of a civilization that had destroyed itself. This was different. This was the nothing of a door being deliberately kept closed. The probe's communication arrays were working perfectly. Its universal translators were functioning normally. Its friendship protocols were broadcasting on every known frequency. But every signal simply vanished into the void as if it had never existed. More disturbing were the probe's sensor readings. As it approached the border, its instruments began to register something they had never encountered before. The probe was being scanned, not just observed or detected, but thoroughly examined by technologies that made no sense to galactic science. The scanning wasn't aggressive or threatening. It felt almost polite, like a customs inspector checking the contents of a traveler's bag. But the level of detail was frightening. Whatever was scanning the probe knew everything about it. Its construction, its purpose, its origin, even the individual atomic signatures of its components. Then the scanning stopped, and the silence began. Zethara had waited for hours, then days, for some kind of response. Any response, a hostile warning, would have been better than this complete absence of reaction. It was as if the humans had looked at the probe, understood everything about it and its mission, and decided it wasn't worth acknowledging. She called up the historical records again, searching for any clue she might have missed. The earliest, mentions of humans dated back 400 years, when long-range telescopes had detected their first primitive spacecraft. The records showed steady technological advancement, orbital stations, then ships traveling to nearby star systems. But then, about 3 centuries ago, something changed. The human ships became harder to detect. Their energy signatures grew fainter. Their radio transmissions stopped entirely. It was as if they had simply faded away from galactic awareness. Most species assumed the humans had died out. Space was dangerous, and young civilizations often destroyed themselves before reaching maturity. The Galactic Council had marked human space as dormant and moved on to more pressing matters. Only Zethara seemed to care about the mystery. Her colleagues thought she was wasting time on a dead civilization. The Council had better things to worry about than extinct primitives. But the probe's readings proved the humans weren't extinct. They were there, in numbers that suggested a population larger than most galactic civilizations. They had technology advanced enough to scan a probe from light years away. They had chosen not to respond. The choice was what bothered Zethara most. Every other species in the galaxy wanted to make contact, to trade, to share knowledge and culture. It was natural, almost instinctive. Living beings reached out to other living beings. It was one of the fundamental truths of galactic civilization, except for the humans. Zethara pulled up the probe's final transmission. The readings showed massive energy sources throughout human space. Not the chaotic signatures of a struggling civilization, but clean, controlled power on a scale that dwarfed anything the galaxy had achieved. Whatever the humans were doing, they were doing it very well. So why the silence? The obvious answer was that the humans didn't want contact, but that raised even more questions. Why would a species voluntarily isolate itself? What could they gain from staying hidden? What were they afraid of? Or perhaps the more frightening question, what did they know that the rest of the galaxy didn't? Zethara had spent her entire career mapping the unknown regions of space. She had discovered 17 new civilizations and first contacted 12 species that were now valued members of the galactic community. She understood the excitement of finding new friends among the stars, but this felt different. The silence from human space wasn't the quiet of an empty room. It was the quiet of someone holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. The probe was still there, still broadcasting its messages of friendship and scientific cooperation, still being ignored with what felt like deliberate politeness. The humans knew it was there. They had examined it thoroughly. They had chosen not to respond. Zethara made a decision that would change everything. She began composing a message to the Galactic Council, requesting permission to mount a diplomatic mission to human space. Not another probe, but a real ship with real people aboard. If the humans wouldn't talk to machines, perhaps they would talk to living beings. She suspected the Council would refuse. They had more important concerns than chasing mysteries. The ongoing war between the Keth and the Zoriel required constant attention. Trade disputes needed to be resolved. New worlds needed to be integrated into galactic society. But Zethara had to try. The silence from human space felt like a puzzle that needed solving, a door that needed opening. Something told her that whatever lay behind that door would be more important than any war or trade dispute. She just hoped the galaxy was ready for what they might find. As she finished her report, Zethara glanced once more at the star charts. The section marked Human Space seemed to stare back at her, a blank spot in the middle of the galaxy's most complete map. A reminder that even after 3 centuries of exploration, there were still mysteries waiting to be discovered. The probe continued its lonely vigil at the border, broadcasting messages that no one would answer. But in human space, in the clean energy signatures and massive structures that showed no signs of decay or abandonment, something was listening. Something was waiting. The diplomatic mission. The council chamber buzzed with the voices of a dozen different species. Zethara stood at the center of the circular room, feeling small under the weight of so many skeptical stares. Her proposal had been met with everything, from confusion to outright laughter. Counselor Vex, a massive creature with rock-like skin and glowing red eyes, leaned forward in his seat. "Captain Zethara, you want us to approve a diplomatic mission to a dead civilization. This seems like a waste of resources we cannot spare." "The humans aren't dead," Zethara replied, keeping her voice steady. "The probe readings clearly show massive population centers and advanced technology. They're there, they're thriving, and they're choosing not to respond to our contact attempts." "Perhaps they don't want contact," suggested Counselor Nira, her insect-like features clicking with disapproval. "We should respect their wishes and leave them alone." "Or perhaps they're afraid," said Counselor Thorne, the elderly leader whose species had been the first to form the Galactic Consortium. "A young civilization might fear contact with the wider galaxy. We've seen this before." Zethara shook her head. "The energy readings don't match a fearful civilization. These are controlled, massive power sources. The humans have technology we can barely understand. They're not hiding from us out of fear." The debate continued for hours. Some council members worried about the cost of the mission. Others feared it might be a trap. A few simply didn't care about solving the mystery of human space. But Zethara had allies. Counselor Merrick, whose people had been contacted by Zethara herself 20 years earlier, spoke passionately about the importance of reaching out to isolated civilizations. Counselor Yill reminded the chamber that the consortium's founding principles required them to welcome all peaceful species into the galactic community. Finally, after much arguing, the council reached a compromise. Zethara would be allowed to take a single ship to human space, but she could only stay for 2 weeks. If the humans still refused contact after that time, the matter would be considered closed. 3 weeks later, Zethara stood on the bridge of the diplomatic vessel Harmony. Her crew was small but diverse. Dr. Kess, a brilliant linguist whose feathered species had mastered over 3,000 languages. Engineer Bollocks, whose mechanical people were the galaxy's finest tech specialists. Navigator Senna, whose mathematical gifts had helped map more star systems than anyone alive. Each crew member had volunteered for what many considered a pointless mission. But Zethara had chosen them carefully. They were all people who believed in the importance of making contact with new civilizations, no matter how strange or difficult. The journey to human space took 2 weeks. As they traveled, the crew prepared for every possibility they could imagine. Dr. Kess updated his translation protocols with every human language fragment that had ever been detected. Engineer Bollocks checked and rechecked the ship's defensive systems, just in case. Navigator Senna plotted multiple escape routes from human space, hoping they wouldn't be needed. But as they approached the border, something unexpected began to happen. The ship's computers started acting strangely, not malfunctioning exactly, but behaving in ways that made no sense. Navigation systems would suddenly display star charts with impossible detail. The communication array began picking up signals that contained no actual information but felt somehow meaningful. The ship's medical scanners started performing full health checks on the crew without being asked. "Captain," Engineer Bollocks reported, his mechanical voice carrying an unusual note of confusion. "Our systems are being accessed, but I can't find any sign of intrusion. It's as if the ship is volunteering information." Dr. Kess looked up from his translation console. "I'm detecting scanning attempts, but they're unlike anything in our databases. Whatever is examining us isn't using any technology we recognize." Zethara felt a chill run through her purple skin. The stories from the probe were repeating themselves, but this time with living beings aboard. Something in human space was studying them with the same thorough, polite attention that had been given to the unmanned probe. But unlike the probe, the Harmony carried diplomatic protocols and living minds capable of communication. If the humans were scanning them, perhaps they would finally get a response. The answer came 3 days after crossing into human space. Zethara was reviewing diplomatic protocols when Navigator Senna called out in excitement, "Captain, I'm detecting ships approaching our position. 3 vessels, configuration unknown. The crew gathered on the bridge to watch the approaching ships appear on their screens. What they saw left them speechless. The human vessels were beautiful in a way that defied explanation. They had clean, flowing lines that seemed to bend light around them. No visible weapons, no obvious propulsion systems, no energy signatures that their instruments could identify. They moved through space like living things, graceful and confident. "How are they moving?" Engineer Bollocks asked, his sensors working frantically to understand what they were seeing. "I can't detect any drive systems, any fuel consumption, any thrust mechanisms at all." "And they're not using subspace communication," Dr. Kess added. "But somehow I'm receiving what feels like a greeting, not in words but in concepts." Before anyone could respond, the lead human ship was alongside the Harmony. A docking tube extended from its hull and sealed against their airlock with perfect precision. No requests for permission, no exchange of technical specifications, no discussion of environmental compatibility. The humans simply attached their ship as if they had built both vessels themselves. "Should we open the airlock?" Navigator Senna asked nervously. Zathara straightened her diplomatic uniform and nodded. "We came here to make contact. Let's see what happens." The airlock opened, and 3 humans stepped aboard. Zathara had seen images of humans before, but meeting them in person was different. They looked remarkably similar to the ancient records, but there was something in their eyes that spoke of centuries of experience. They moved with quiet confidence, as if boarding alien ships was something they did every day. The lead human was a tall woman with dark skin and graying hair. She smiled warmly at the gathered crew and spoke in perfect Galactic standard. "Welcome to human space. I'm Admiral Chen. We've been expecting you." Dr. Kess nearly fell over. "You speak Galactic standard? But how? When did you learn our languages?" Admiral Chen's smile widened slightly. "We've been listening for quite some time, Dr. Kess. Your translation protocols are impressive but hardly necessary. We learned your languages decades ago." "You know who I am?" Dr. Kess asked, his feathers ruffling with surprise. "We know all of you," Admiral Chen replied simply. "Captain Zathara, the finest cartographer in the galaxy. Engineer Bollocks, whose technical innovations have improved ship safety throughout known space. Navigator Senna, who discovered the Kalos Passage that shortened trade routes by 30%. The crew exchanged nervous glances. How could the humans know so much about them? More importantly, why hadn't they ever made contact if they knew so much about galactic civilization? "Admiral Chen," Zathara said carefully, "the Galactic Consortium has been trying to contact your people for months. Why haven't you responded to our diplomatic overtures?" Admiral Chen's expression grew thoughtful. "That's a complex question, Captain. Perhaps it would be better discussed somewhere more comfortable. Would you and your crew be willing to visit one of our stations? I think you'll find the conversation quite enlightening." Zathara looked at her crew. Each of them nodded, slightly. They had come this far to solve the mystery of human space. It would be foolish to turn back now. "We accept your invitation," Zathara said formally. Admiral Chen's smile returned. "Excellent. Please follow us. There's much to show you and even more to discuss." As the humans returned to their ship, Zathara felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. They were about to become the first galactic citizens to visit human space in centuries. Whatever they learned, there would change everything. The human ships began moving again, leading the Harmony deeper into their territory. As they traveled, Zathara noticed that space itself seemed different here. Cleaner, somehow, more organized. Even the stars seemed to shine with a steadier light. Behind them, the border of human space faded into the distance. Ahead lay answers to questions the galaxy had been asking for 300 years. Zathara just hoped they were ready for what they would learn. The revelation. The human station appeared gradually, growing larger as they approached until it dominated the view screen. Zathara had seen many impressive structures in her career, but nothing like this. The station was enormous, easily the size of a small moon, yet it moved through space with impossible grace. "By the stars," whispered Navigator Senna. "How is something that large even stable? The gravitational stresses alone should tear it apart." Engineer Bollocks was scanning frantically, his mechanical sensors working overtime. "Captain, I'm not detecting any structural supports, any gravity generators, any of the technology that should be keeping this thing together. It's as if the laws of physics are being politely ignored." Admiral Chen's voice came through the communication system. "Docking Bay 7 is prepared for your vessel. Please follow the guidance lights." As the Harmony settled into the docking bay, Zethara noticed that the entire process felt effortless. No struggling with gravitational fields or atmospheric pressure differences. The bay seemed to adjust itself to accommodate their ship perfectly. When they stepped off the Harmony, they found themselves in a space that shouldn't have been possible. The docking bay was enormous, easily large enough to hold 100 ships like theirs, yet the atmosphere was perfectly breathable for all 4 species represented in the crew. The lighting was soft and pleasant, and the gravity felt exactly right for each of them simultaneously. "How is this possible?" Dr. Kess asked, his translation equipment working overtime to process what his senses were telling him. "The environmental needs of our species are completely different. This should be a compromise that satisfies no one." Admiral Chen, who had been waiting for them, smiled patiently. "We've had some time to work on the technical problems, Dr. Kess. When you can manipulate matter at the quantum level, environmental compatibility becomes much simpler." The tour that followed left the crew speechless. They walked through corridors that seemed to stretch forever, past windows that showed impossible views of space and time. They saw gardens where plants from dozens of worlds grew together in perfect harmony, despite requiring completely different soil, light, and atmospheric conditions. In one laboratory, human scientists worked with equipment that made no sense to galactic science. Devices that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. Computers that processed information faster than light. Screens showing mathematical equations that hurt to look at directly. "This is our cultural exchange center," Admiral Chen explained, as they entered a vast chamber filled with art and artifacts from across the galaxy. "We've been collecting and studying galactic civilization for quite some time." Zethara stopped in front of a display case containing a ceremonial dagger from her homeworld. The weapon was over 800 years old and had been lost in a museum robbery 50 years before she was born. "How do you have this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "We've been watching," Admiral Chen said simply. "We've been learning. We've been waiting." "Waiting for what?" Engineer Bollocks demanded, his mechanical voice carrying an edge of frustration. Admiral Chen led them to a comfortable seating area where refreshments had been prepared. Each crew member found food and drink perfectly suited to their species' needs, despite the fact that no human should have known their dietary requirements. "Waiting for the galaxy to be ready," Admiral Chen said, settling into her chair. "Please, sit. There's much to explain, and some of it may be difficult to hear." Zethara sat down carefully, accepting a cup of her favorite tea from her homeworld. The taste was perfect, exactly as her grandmother had made it. The implications were staggering. 3 centuries ago, Admiral Chen began, humanity made first contact with galactic civilization, much as you would expect. We sent radio signals, then crewed ships, then formal ambassadors. We were excited to join the community of intelligent species. Dr. Kess leaned forward. "But we have no records of any human contact attempts." "No, you wouldn't," Admiral Chen agreed, "because we never sent them. We stopped before making formal contact." "Why?" Zethara asked. Admiral Chen's expression grew serious. "Because we learned about the galaxy, and we weren't impressed." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Navigator Senna was the first to recover. "Not impressed?" The galactic community represents thousands of worlds, billions of beings, and centuries of cooperation and advancement. Yes, Admiral, Chen said. And in all that time, what have you accomplished? The question seemed absurd. Engineer Bollock started listing achievements immediately. We've ended wars, established trade routes, shared technology, explored new worlds, created art, and literature that spans dozens of species. You've managed your problems, Admiral Chen interrupted gently. You haven't solved them. In 3 centuries of galactic civilization, how many wars are currently being fought? The crew exchanged uncomfortable glances. The answer was depressing. Dozens, Zathara admitted, but that's down from hundreds in earlier periods. How many worlds still struggle with poverty, disease, or resource shortages? Thousands, Dr. Kess said quietly. But progress takes time. How many species still believe that some must suffer for others to prosper? Navigator Senna couldn't meet Admiral Chen's eyes. Most of them, she whispered. Admiral Chen nodded sadly. We spent 50 years observing galactic civilization. We watched wars fought over resources that could have been shared. We saw species that could have been lifted up instead being left behind. We observed a community that had the knowledge to create paradise for everyone, but chose instead to accept that some would live in misery. That's not fair, Zathara protested. Change takes time. Progress is slow. You can't expect perfection. Can't we? Admiral Chen asked. Captain, in the 3 centuries that galactic civilization has been managing its problems, humanity has solved them. She gestured toward the walls of the station. We don't fight wars because we eliminated scarcity. We don't struggle with disease because we mastered biology. We don't argue over territory because we learned to create space itself. Engineer Bollock's sensors were working frantically. That's impossible. The energy requirements alone, only impossible if you accept the limitations that the galaxy has convinced itself are permanent, Admiral Chen said. We spent the first 100 years after our isolation breakthrough developing zero-point energy extraction, unlimited power, from the quantum foam itself. She touched a control panel, and a holographic display showed the human power grid. The energy numbers were staggering, orders of magnitude beyond anything in galactic science. The second 100 years were devoted to mastering matter manipulation at the quantum level. When you can restructure atoms at will, material shortages become meaningless. Another display showed human manufacturing facilities creating complex materials from basic elements. The crew watched in awe as diamond harder than any known substance was grown from atmospheric carbon in seconds. The third 100 years brought us mastery over space-time itself, faster than light travel without exotic matter, artificial gravity without massive generators, pocket dimensions for storage and manufacturing. Dr. Kess was frantically taking notes, though his equipment was struggling to keep up with the technical specifications being displayed. This is impossible, he muttered. These technologies violate known physics. They violate galactic physics, Admiral Chen corrected. Physics itself is much more flexible than your scientists believe. Zathara felt overwhelmed. Everything she thought she knew about the limitations of technology was being rewritten before her eyes. If you've solved all these problems, why haven't you shared the solutions? Why haven't you helped the galaxy? Admiral Chen's expression grew sad. We tried, Captain. Not directly, but we tried. We've been quietly releasing technological hints for decades, medical advances that could have ended disease, energy solutions that could have ended scarcity, agricultural techniques that could have ended hunger. I don't understand, Navigator Senna said. Think about it, Admiral Chen said. In the last 50 years, how many mysterious technological breakthroughs have appeared in galactic civilization? Advances that seem to come from nowhere, that couldn't be traced to any specific research program? The crew thought about it. There had been quite a few unexplained advances in recent decades. Everyone had assumed they were the result of collaborative research or lucky accidents. Those were gifts from humanity, Admiral Chen confirmed. We've been trying to nudge galactic civilization toward better solutions for decades. And do you know what happened to most of our gifts? Zethara had a sinking feeling she knew the answer. They were weaponized, Admiral Chen said simply. Medical, technology became biological weapons. Energy solutions were turned into bombs. Agricultural advances were restricted to wealthy worlds, while poor ones continued to starve. The silence in the room was deafening. So we stopped giving gifts, Admiral. Chen continued. And we waited. We watched. We hoped that eventually, galactic civilization would mature enough to deserve the tools we could offer. And have we? Zethara asked, though she feared the answer. Admiral Chen looked at each of them in turn. That remains to be seen. Your arrival here suggests that some individuals in the galaxy are ready to ask the right questions, but individuals aren't civilizations. The demonstration. The message from the Galactic Council arrived 3 days after Zethara's initial report. The response was predictably skeptical, bordering on dismissive. Counselor Vex's recorded message was particularly blunt. Captain Zethara, your claims about human technological capabilities are difficult to believe. While we appreciate your enthusiasm for first contact protocols, we require concrete evidence before the Council can take any formal action regarding human space. Admiral Chen read the message with what appeared to be mild amusement. They want proof, she said simply. That's understandable. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Dr. Kess looked nervous. Admiral, with respect, the Council isn't known for being impressed easily. Some of them have been around for centuries. They've seen a lot of technological demonstrations. I'm sure they have, Admiral Chen replied, but I doubt they've seen anything like what we can show them. She led the crew to what she called a demonstration facility, though the room looked more like an art gallery than a laboratory. The walls were lined with display cases containing objects that seemed to shift and change when viewed from different angles. The Council wants evidence of our technological capabilities, Admiral Chen said. Where would you like us to start? Engineer Bollocks immediately activated his sensors. Those devices in the display cases. My instruments can't identify what they're made of. Admiral Chen walked to the nearest case and removed what looked like a simple metal sphere. This is composed of a material that exists in 7 dimensions, simultaneously. In your 3-dimensional space, it appears solid, but it's actually accessing resources from parallel realities. She tossed the sphere to Bollocks, who caught it with his mechanical hands. His sensors immediately went haywire. Impossible, he muttered, scanning the object from every angle. The mass readings are fluctuating. Sometimes it weighs as much as a feather, sometimes as much as a small asteroid, but it feels exactly the same in my hands. Mass is relative, Admiral Chen explained. When you can manipulate dimensional boundaries, physical properties become much more flexible. Navigator Senna was studying another display case. Admiral, this device appears to be showing star charts, but they're changing faster than I can follow. And some of these star systems don't exist in our galaxy. Correct, Admiral Chen said. That's a navigation aid for interdimensional travel. Those star charts show the same physical locations across multiple parallel realities. The changing displays show how stellar positions shift when you move between dimensional layers, Doctor. Cass had found something that made his translation equipment screech with feedback. What is this? It's trying to communicate, but in languages that don't exist. Admiral Chen joined him at the display. That's a communication device for speaking with species that evolved in different dimensional frameworks. Some intelligent life forms exist as pure information, others as quantum probability clouds. Standard translation protocols don't work when the speakers don't share the same physical reality. The demonstrations continued for hours. Admiral Chen showed them materials that could repair themselves by reversing local time flow, computers that solved problems by calculating every possible outcome simultaneously across infinite parallel realities, weapons that could restructure matter at the subatomic level but were kept permanently offline as a matter of policy. "Why don't you use the weapons?" Zethara asked as they observed a device that could theoretically convert any matter into any other matter instantly. "What would be the point?" Admiral Chen replied. "When you can create anything you need from basic elements, when you have unlimited energy and unlimited space, what would you fight over? Wars are fought over scarcity. Remove scarcity. Remove the cause of war." Engineer Bollocks was still struggling with the implications of what he was seeing. "Admiral, these technologies would revolutionize galactic civilization overnight. The energy solutions alone could end resource conflicts across 1,000 worlds." "Yes, they could," Admiral Chen agreed. "But they would also end the current power structures that those conflicts support. How do you think the galaxy's current leaders would react to technologies that made their positions irrelevant?" The question hung in the air as the crew considered it. Many galactic governments depended on controlling scarce resources. Remove the scarcity, and the control became meaningless. "They would fight to suppress the technology," Dr. Kess said quietly. "They would claim it was dangerous or unstable or that releasing it would cause social chaos." "Exactly," Admiral Chen said. "We've run the social models. Releasing our technology to the current galactic civilization would cause more harm than good in the short term. The existing power structures would resist change violently." Navigator Senna was examining a device that seemed to bend space around itself. "So you're waiting for the galaxy to change on its own?" "We're waiting for the galaxy to choose change," Admiral Chen corrected. "There's a difference. Change imposed from outside rarely lasts. Change chosen from within is permanent." She led them to a final demonstration that left them speechless. In the center of the room was what appeared to be an empty space marked by a simple metal ring. Admiral Chen activated a control panel, and suddenly they were looking at Earth. Not an image of Earth, not a holographic representation. They were looking through a window that showed the real Earth, over 100 light-years away in perfect real-time detail. Instantaneous observation across any distance, Admiral Chen explained. "We've been watching galactic civilization this way for centuries. We know about every war, every breakthrough, every diplomatic crisis as it happens." Dr. Kess was frantically trying to understand what he was seeing. "The information transmission alone should be impossible. Nothing travels faster than light." "Nothing travels through normal space faster than light," Admiral Chen corrected. "But information doesn't have to travel through normal space. When you can access higher dimensions, distance becomes irrelevant." The view through the window shifted, showing different worlds across the galaxy. They saw the ongoing war between the Keth and Zoriel, with ships destroying each other over mining rights to an asteroid field. They saw refugee camps on border worlds where displaced populations struggled with hunger and disease. They saw trade negotiations where wealthy species bargained for resources while poor worlds were excluded from the discussions. "This is why we wait," Admiral Chen said softly. "This is why we haven't intervened. Look at what the galaxy does with the technology it already has." The images were hard to watch. Every problem they observed could have been solved easily with human technology. The resources being fought over could have been created from nothing. The diseases could have been cured. The scarcity could have been eliminated. But instead of solving problems, the galaxy seemed content to manage them. "The Council will want to see this," Zethara said finally. "All of it. They need to understand what you're offering." Admiral Chen nodded. "We're prepared to provide a full demonstration to the Council, but they need to understand that this isn't just about technology, it's about wisdom. The tools we can offer are powerful enough to create paradise or to destroy everything that exists. She gestured toward the window, showing galactic conflicts. Your current civilization has proven it can be trusted with limited power. The question is whether it can be trusted with unlimited power. Engineer Bollocks looked up from his attempts to scan the impossible devices around them. What would it take to prove that trust? Admiral Chen's expression grew serious. That's the right question, Engineer Bollocks, but it's not one we can answer for you. The galaxy has to decide for itself what kind of civilization it wants to be. She paused, looking at each crew member in turn. We can offer you the tools to end every form of suffering that currently exists in the galaxy. We can give you technologies that would make every species equal, every world prosperous, every individual capable of reaching their full potential. The crew waited, sensing that something important was coming. But, Admiral Chen continued, accepting those tools means accepting the responsibility that comes with them. It means choosing cooperation over competition, wisdom over cleverness, the welfare of all over the advantage of a few. And if the galaxy isn't ready to make that choice? Navigator Senna asked. Admiral Chen's smile was sad, but not without hope. Then we continue to wait. We've been patient for 3 centuries. We can be patient for 3 more if necessary. She gestured toward the display cases full of impossible technology. These tools aren't going anywhere. When the galaxy is ready for them, they'll be here. When galactic civilization decides to grow up, we'll be ready to help. The demonstration was over, but its implications would echo through the galaxy for years to come. Humanity had revealed not just their technological superiority, but their moral position as well. They were offering unlimited power, but only to those wise enough to use it properly. The question now was whether the galaxy would prove itself worthy of such trust. The choice. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was the largest gathering in the organization's history. Representatives from over 300 species packed the Great Chamber, with millions more watching through quantum communication links. The recordings and evidence that Zethara had brought back from human space had shaken the galaxy to its core. Counselor Thorne, ancient and wise, called for order as the debates grew heated. We have all seen the evidence. We have all heard the testimony. The question before us now is simple. How do we respond to humanity's offer? The offer itself was unprecedented in galactic history. Admiral Chen had transmitted a formal proposal to the Council 3 days after Zethara's return. The terms were straightforward and terrifying in their implications. Humanity would share their technology freely with any species that committed to fundamental changes in how they approached civilization. No more wars over resources that could be made infinite. No more acceptance of poverty or disease as inevitable. No more exploitation of weaker species by stronger ones. In return, humanity would provide the tools to make paradise a reality for everyone. The debates had been raging for weeks. This is madness, declared Counselor Vex, his rocky features showing stress fractures from the intensity of the discussions. They're asking us to abandon systems of government that have worked for thousands of years. They want us to restructure our entire civilization based on the promises of a species we barely understand. Counselor Nira's insect-like features clicked with agitation. More than that, they're asking us to trust them with technologies that could destroy us all. What guarantee do we have that this isn't some elaborate trap? What if they're planning to conquer the galaxy once we've dismantled our defenses? But other voices spoke in favor of accepting humanity's offer. Counselor Merrick stood before the assembly, his voice carrying the weight of personal experience. 20 years ago, Captain Zethara's people found my world dying from a plague that our science couldn't cure. They didn't ask for anything in return. They didn't demand changes to our government or our culture. They simply helped because it was the right thing to do. He gestured toward the human delegation that had arrived the previous week. Admiral Chen sat quietly in the observer section, apparently unbothered by the heated debates surrounding her people's proposal. The humans could have conquered us at any point in the last 3 centuries, Merrick continued. They have the technology, they have the power, but instead of conquering, they waited. Instead of imposing their will, they offered us a choice. Counselor Yill rose from her seat, her crystalline form reflecting the chamber's lights. But what kind of choice is it, really? Accept their demands or continue to suffer with problems they could solve easily? It feels like coercion disguised as generosity. Dr. Kess, who had been granted speaking privileges as part of the first contact team, requested permission to address the chamber. Counselors, I've spent weeks studying human technology. I've seen what they can do. They're not bluffing, and they're not exaggerating. They really can end scarcity, cure any disease, and provide unlimited energy. He paused, looking around the chamber at the hundreds of species represented. But more importantly, I've studied their culture. They've had these capabilities for centuries, and they've never used them to harm anyone. They could have turned themselves into gods ruling over the galaxy. Instead, they chose to wait for us to become worthy of joining them. Engineer Bollocks, his mechanical voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics, added his own observations. The technology they've shown us isn't just advanced, it's responsible. Every device, every system, every capability has built-in safeguards to prevent misuse. They've spent as much effort making their tools safe as they have making them powerful. The debates continued for days. Some species immediately announced their intention to accept humanity's terms. The Vorthak, whose tree-like forms had always valued harmony and cooperation, saw the offer as a natural evolution of galactic civilization. The Nexari, whose crystalline minds processed information differently from most species, understood the mathematical elegance of humanity's proposal. But others resisted fiercely. The Keth and Zoriel, currently at war over mining rights, refused to consider ending their conflict. The Dominion of 12 Suns, which controlled trade routes through half the galaxy, saw humanity's offer as a threat to their economic power. The most vocal opposition came from the hegemony, a collection of militaristic species that had built their entire culture around conquest and domination. "You're asking us to abandon everything that makes us strong," declared Hegemon Brutus, his scarred features showing the results of a lifetime of warfare. "You want us to give up our armies, our competitive advantages, our right to expand and grow. This isn't evolution, it's extinction." Admiral Chen finally requested permission to address the council directly. Her words, when they came, were simple and devastating. "Hegemon Brutus, your people currently control 47 star systems. You maintain this control through military force, requiring constant warfare against your neighbors. Your population lives in a state of perpetual mobilization, with most of your resources devoted to weapons and ships." She activated a holographic display showing hegemony space. With human technology, you could have the resources of 1,000 star systems without taking them from anyone. Your people could live in luxury and security without requiring a single soldier or weapon. "But we would have no enemies to defeat," Brutus protested. "No challenges to overcome. No glory to win." "You would have infinite challenges," Admiral Chen replied. "The challenge of exploring other dimensions. The challenge of understanding the fundamental nature of reality. The challenge of becoming something greater than you ever imagined possible." She looked around the chamber at all the assembled representatives. "This is what we're offering. Not the end of growth or achievement, but the beginning of growth beyond anything you've ever dreamed." The hegemon was unmoved. "We choose our path. We will not abandon our nature to become weak like you." Admiral Chen's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes suggested sadness rather than anger. "That is your choice to make, Hegemon. No one will force you to accept our offer." The final vote, when it came, split the galaxy almost perfectly in half. 153 species voted to accept humanity's terms and begin the transformation to a post-scarcity civilization. 147 species voted to maintain their current systems and reject the human offer. The result was unprecedented in galactic history. For the first time since the formation of the consortium, the galaxy would be divided not by war or politics, but by a fundamental choice about the future of civilization itself. Admiral Chen addressed the chamber one final time after the vote was announced. To those species that have chosen to join us, welcome. The transformation will not be easy or instant. Changing an entire civilization takes time, patience, and wisdom. We will help you every step of the way, but the work must be yours to do. She turned to address the species that had voted against the proposal. To those who have chosen to maintain your current path, that choice will be respected. Human space will remain open to you if you change your minds. Our offer is not limited. In time. But, she added, and her voice carried a note of finality, we will not permit the transformed civilizations to be threatened or attacked by those who reject transformation. Any attempt to use force against our allies will be met with decisive response. The implications were clear. Humanity had just drawn a line across the galaxy. On one side would be the species that chose cooperation, abundance, and growth. On the other would be those that chose competition, scarcity, and conflict. The question now was which side would prove to be the future of galactic civilization. As the council session ended and representatives began to disperse, Zethara found herself standing in the empty chamber with Admiral Chen. The human leader seemed smaller now, somehow more human, and less like the representative of an impossibly advanced civilization. Do you think we made the right choice? Admiral Chen asked quietly. Zethara considered the question carefully. I think you made the only choice you could make. You offered us paradise, but only if we proved we deserved it. Some of us were ready, others weren't. Admiral Chen nodded slowly. The species that rejected our offer aren't evil. They're just not ready to let go of the systems and beliefs that brought them this far. Perhaps in time they will be. And if they never are? Admiral Chen's smile was sad but patient. Then we continue as we have for 3 centuries, watching, waiting, hoping that eventually the galaxy will choose wisdom over power. As they walked out of the chamber together, Zethara realized that the greatest revelation wasn't humanity's technology or their capabilities. It was their restraint. A species with the power of gods had chosen to wait patiently for the rest of the galaxy to grow up, rather than forcing change from above. The silence that had puzzled galactic civilization for so long finally made sense. It wasn't the silence of the absent or the dead. It was the silence of those wise enough to speak only when they had something worth saying. And humanity had finally decided that the galaxy was ready to listen. At least, half of it was ready.
Captain Jack Miller stared at the radar screen in disbelief. 6 unknown objects had just entered Earth's orbit, moving in perfect formation at speeds no human craft could achieve. At 45 years old, with salt and pepper hair, and 20 years of United Earth Defense Force service, Jack had seen plenty of strange things, but nothing like this. "Sir, we're getting some kind of transmission," said Lisa Donovan, the communications specialist. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she tried to process the incoming signal. At 32, Lisa was one of the best in her field, recruited directly from MIT's Advanced Signals program. I think it's a first contact message." The large screen at the front of the command center flickered to life. The image that appeared made everyone in the room gasp. The alien had a sleek black exoskeleton, multiple compound eyes that reflected the light like polished obsidian, and clicking mandibles that moved as it spoke. Behind it, the walls of its ship gleamed with technology far beyond human understanding. "People of Earth," the alien said in surprisingly good English. "We are the Vecturi. We come in peace and wish to share knowledge and resources with your kind. That was 3 weeks ago. Now Jack found himself sitting across from the Vecturi ambassador in the United Nations headquarters in New York. Lisa sat beside him, her face tight with concern. "Our scientists would very much like to visit your military installations," said Ambassador Zexkar, its mandibles clicking rapidly, and what the humans had learned was excitement. "We have much to teach you about planetary defense. I'm sure you, do," Jack replied carefully. "But our protocols require a more gradual exchange. Perhaps we could start with medical technology instead." The ambassador's eyes seemed to darken. "Military technology would benefit your people more immediately." Lisa leaned forward. "Ambassador, we appreciate your offer, but we prefer to start with civilian technologies." As they left the meeting, Lisa pulled Jack aside. "Did you notice how interested they are in our defenses? How they keep asking about our missile systems and satellite networks?" Jack nodded slowly. "I noticed. I've been in enough wars to recognize when someone's gathering intelligence." "The UN Security Council thinks I'm being paranoid," Lisa said, frustration clear in her voice. "They're so excited about alien technology that they're ignoring all the warning signs." Jack looked out the window at the huge Vecturi ship hovering over Manhattan. "Keep documenting everything. I'll talk to some old military contacts. Something isn't right here." 3 days later, Jack was awakened at 3 a.m. by his secure phone buzzing. It was General Howard, his former commanding officer. "Jack, we've lost contact with the lunar colony," the general said without preamble. "All communications went dark an hour ago. The UN is sending a delegation to ask the Vecturi if they know anything." "That's a mistake," Jack said, already pulling on his clothes. "We need to go to high alert now. The president won't authorize it. He's afraid of offending our new alien friends." Jack swore under his breath. "Then we need to prepare anyway, quietly." He called Lisa next. She answered immediately, as if she hadn't been sleeping. "I was about to call you. The Deep Space Radar Station in Australia picked up 20 more Vecturi ships entering the solar system. They told us they only had 6 ships," Jack said grimly. No, I'm sending you the data now. These aren't diplomatic vessels, Jack, they're warships." Jack spent the next 8 hours trying to convince anyone who would listen that Earth was in danger. Few did. The Vecturi had promised miracle cures for diseases, solutions to climate change, and faster-than-light travel. Most world leaders were too dazzled by these promises to see the threat. Lisa met him for lunch at a small diner away from the UN building. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep. "I've been analyzing their language patterns," she said, showing him her tablet. "There are inconsistencies in their translations. When they talk about sharing resources, the original Vecturi phrase is closer to harvesting resources. When they talk about cultural exchange, the original is more like species assessment." Jack felt a chill run down his spine. "Have you shown this to anyone else?" "I tried. The linguistics team says my sample size is too small to draw conclusions." The television above the counter suddenly switched to breaking news. A somber-faced reporter appeared. "We interrupt this program with urgent news. There has been an incident at the lunar colony. Details are still coming in, but it appears there was some kind of explosion. The Vecturi government has offered assistance in the rescue operation." Jack and Lisa exchanged looks of dread. "It's starting," Jack whispered. "They never made it back to the UN." As they left the diner, the sky lit up with a blinding flash. A massive explosion rocked the city, shattering windows and setting off car alarms up and down the street. Jack pulled Lisa into a doorway, shielding her as debris rained down. When they looked up, the Vecturi ship was no longer hovering peacefully. It had moved into attack position, and smaller craft were pouring from its hangars. Jack's phone buzzed, with an emergency alert. Similar attacks were happening in major cities worldwide. The lunar colony hadn't suffered an accident. It had been the first target in a coordinated invasion. "We need to get out of the city," Jack said, pulling Lisa toward the subway. "Now." "Where are we going?" she asked, stumbling as another explosion shook the ground. "I have a cabin in the Catskills, stocked with supplies off the grid. We can regroup there, try to contact others who saw this coming." As they descended into the subway, the power went out. plunging everything into darkness. Emergency lights flickered on, casting eerie shadows. "Do you think they planned this all along?" Lisa asked, as they navigated through the panicking crowd. "Yes," Jack replied grimly. "They studied us, learned our weaknesses, figured out who to charm and who to isolate. Classic invasion strategy." They emerged from another subway exit 10 blocks away. The sky was filled with Vecturi craft now, and in the distance they could see strange energy weapons firing into government buildings. Jack led them through back alleys and side streets, avoiding the main roads where aliens were already landing ground troops. These soldiers looked different from the ambassadors, larger with heavy armor and weapons that fired pulses of blue energy. "They don't know Earth as well as they think," Jack said as they hot-wired an abandoned car. "They've taken out our governments, our power grid, our communications. But humans have been fighting guerrilla wars against superior forces for our entire history." Lisa looked at the determination on his face and felt a spark of hope amid the horror. "You think we can fight back? Against that?" She pointed at a massive Vecturi walker stomping through a distant intersection, blasting anything that moved. "No, we can," Jack said, starting the car engine. "They expect us to surrender once our leaders fall. They don't understand that humans never give up, and they've made one critical mistake." "What's that?" Lisa asked as they sped out of the city, weaving between abandoned vehicles. Jack's face was hard in the reddish light of the burning city behind them. "They showed their hand too early. If they'd been more patient, they might have gotten all our defense secrets, disabled all our backup systems. But now they'll face a species that knows it's fighting for survival, and nothing is more dangerous than a cornered human." As they drove into the countryside, they could see small groups of people heading for the hills and forests. Some carried weapons, others supplies. Already, without communication or coordination, humans were instinctively doing what they'd always done when faced with overwhelming force: disappearing, regrouping, preparing to fight back from the shadows. The Vecturi thought they had won the war. They were about to learn it had barely begun. 6 months passed since the Vecturi invasion began. The Catskill Mountains were covered in a light dusting of early winter snow. Inside a well-hidden cabin, Jack Miller cleaned his rifle while Lisa Donovan studied a hand-drawn map spread across a wooden table. The cabin had become their base of operations and a gathering point for other survivors. "The aliens have set up another supply depot here," Lisa said, marking a spot on the map. "According to our scouts, they're bringing in more of that terraforming equipment." Jack nodded. Their group had grown from just the two of them to nearly 30 people. Some were former military like Jack. Others were civilians with useful skills. All were committed to fighting back against the alien invaders. "How many guards?" Jack asked. "That's the interesting part," Lisa replied. "Only 6. They still don't expect resistance this far from the cities." A knock at the door made them both reach for weapons, but the pattern, 3 quick taps, a pause, then 2 more, identified the visitor as one of their own. Mary Clark, a former park ranger who knew the mountains better than anyone, stepped inside, bringing a blast of cold air. With her, "You need to see this," Mary said, unwrapping something from a cloth. It was a piece of the alien's armor, the black exoskeleton material that had proven nearly impenetrable to normal bullets. "Where did you get this?" Jack asked, taking the piece and examining it. "Bill shot one of their scouts. Something weird happened. The alien was walking through a stream, and when Bill fired, the bullet went straight through this spot." She pointed to what looked like a joint in the armor. Lisa grabbed a magnifying glass from the table and examined the damaged section. "The material has changed. See how it's lighter in color where the water touched it?" Jack looked closer. "You're right. The water did something to it." "Not just any water," Mary explained. "The stream runs past the old iron mine. The water there is full of minerals." Lisa's eyes lit up with excitement. "We need to test this. Different substances, different conditions. Maybe their armor isn't as perfect as we thought." Over the next few days, they experimented with captured pieces of Vecturi technology. They discovered that the alien's armor weakened when exposed to certain acids. Their vision systems couldn't see well in heavy rain or thick smoke. Most importantly, they found that despite the Vecturi's advanced technology, the aliens themselves had poor night vision and struggled to track moving targets in dense forest. One evening, as the group gathered around the cabin's fireplace, a static-filled transmission came through on the radio they'd built from salvaged parts. The voice was barely audible through the interference. "This is Commander Olivia Garcia, U.S. Navy submarine Barracuda. If anyone receives this transmission, please respond with your location and status." Jack grabbed the microphone. "Commander, this is Captain Jack Miller, formerly of the Earth Defense Force. We're in the Catskill Mountains with about 30 survivors. What's your situation?" There was a long pause before the reply came. "Captain, we're maintaining position in the Atlantic. We have 60 personnel aboard and enough supplies for another 3 months. We've been gathering intelligence on the aliens' movements." "As have we," Jack said. "We've discovered some of their weaknesses." For the next hour, they exchanged information. Garcia's submarine wasn't the only human military unit still functioning. There were resistance groups forming all across the globe, sharing discoveries about the invaders' vulnerabilities. "The Vecturi came expecting an easy conquest," Commander Garcia said. "They don't understand human resilience." After the communication ended, Jack called a meeting. "We're not alone," he told the group. "There are fighters all over the world, and now we can coordinate with them." "So what's the plan?" asked Bill Russell, a former construction worker whose knowledge of explosives had proved invaluable. "We strike the supply depot," Jack said. "Not just to destroy it, but to capture their equipment. Then we set a trap for the response team they'll send." Lisa stepped forward. "Based on what we've learned about their communication systems, we can create a false signal to lure more of them in, make them think their initial team found something valuable." The next morning, Jack led a team of 10 toward the alien supply depot. They moved silently through the forest, their clothes blending with the snow and trees. Years of hunting in these woods made them nearly invisible. The Vecturi guards never saw them coming. As Mary had reported, there were only 6 aliens protecting the depot. They patrolled in predictable patterns, never varying their routes or timing. Jack gave the signal. From different positions around the clearing, the humans fired simultaneously. They aimed for the joints in the aliens' armor, where the protective plating was weakest. 5 of the guards fell immediately. The 6th managed to raise its weapon, but Mary's shot caught it in the neck joint before it could fire. "Move fast," Jack ordered. "We have 15 minutes before they notice the guards aren't reporting in." The team quickly gathered the most useful supplies and equipment. Bill set charges around the larger items they couldn't carry, rigging them to explode when the Vecturi reinforcements arrived. Back at a secondary location, a cave system 2 miles from their cabin, Lisa worked with a former electronics engineer named Rick to set up the captured alien communication device. "Ready?" she asked when the team returned. Jack nodded, and Lisa activated the transmitter. She had spent months studying the Vecturi language and communication protocols. Now she sent a message that would sound like an excited guard reporting the discovery of a large human weapons cache. "How long until they respond?" Jack asked. "Not long," Lisa replied. "They're surprisingly quick to react to good news." Sure enough, within 20 minutes, their lookouts reported a large Vecturi transport heading toward the supply depot. It carried at least 30 alien soldiers, far more than their small group could handle in direct combat. But they weren't planning on direct combat. The aliens landed near the depot and spread out to secure the area. When they found their dead comrades, they moved with more caution, but still followed standard military procedures developed for fighting conventional forces, not hidden guerrilla fighters. "Now," Jack said into his radio. Bill pressed the detonator. The explosives they'd planted erupted, not just destroying the depot but triggering a carefully planned rock slide. Boulders crashed down the hillside, crushing many of the aliens instantly. Those that survived found themselves trapped in the narrow valley, exposed to sniper fire from the humans hidden in the trees above. It was over in minutes. Not a single alien survived to report what had happened. "They still don't get it," Rick said as they collected more alien weapons and technology from the battlefield. "They fight like they're following a rule book." "That's their weakness," Jack replied. They've conquered worlds where everyone follows the same rules they do. But humans? He looked around at his team, a mix of military and civilians who had adapted to become effective fighters. Humans rewrite the rulebook when the old rules don't work anymore. As they headed back to their cave, Lisa's radio picked up transmissions from other resistance groups. A successful raid in the Rocky Mountains, a captured alien scout in Florida, a destroyed Vecturi patrol boat off the coast of Australia. Small victories, but they were adding up. The aliens controlled the cities and the skies, but they were losing the countrysides one ambush at a time. And they still hadn't realized that every defeat was teaching the humans more about how to fight them. The Vecturi had expected surrender. Instead, they were getting a master class in guerrilla warfare from the most adaptable predator species Earth had ever produced. 3 months after the successful raid on the Vecturi supply depot, the resistance network had grown stronger. Jack and Lisa's group had moved from their cabin to an abandoned mining complex deeper in the mountains. The old mine shafts provided better protection from alien scanning technology and more space for their expanding operation. Lisa sat at a makeshift communications center built from a mix of human and alien technology. Thanks to their growing understanding of Vecturi systems, she could now intercept and decode most of the aliens' transmissions. "Jack, you need to hear this," Lisa called out, her voice urgent. She adjusted the dials on her equipment as Jack approached. "What is it?" he asked, leaning over her shoulder. "The Vecturi are bringing in a second wave. Not soldiers this time, civilians, families. They're starting to colonize." Jack's expression darkened. "They think they've already won." "There's more," Lisa continued. "I've picked up transmissions from other resistance groups. The pattern is the same everywhere. The aliens control the cities but can't secure the countryside. They've lost hundreds of patrols to ambushes like ours." Rick entered the communications room, carrying a device he had been working on. At 52, the former electronics engineer had become their technical expert, reverse engineering alien technology. "I've got something," he said, placing the device on the table. It looked like a mix of human radio parts and the shimmering components they'd salvaged from Vecturi equipment. "It's a signal jammer. Should disrupt their communications within a 2-mile radius." "Good work," Jack said. "We'll need it for what's coming next." Later that day, Jack called a meeting in the main chamber of the mine. Their group had grown to nearly 50 people now, including several families who had escaped from Vecturi-controlled cities. Among them was Dr. Alan Foster, a physicist who had been working at a research facility when the invasion began. "The Vecturi are bringing colonists," Jack announced to the gathered crowd. "They believe they've subdued us enough to start settling permanently." "How many?" Mary asked from the back of the room. "According to the transmissions Lisa intercepted, thousands," Jack replied. "They're planning landings in multiple locations, around the globe, including one just 60 miles from here in the Hudson Valley." Dr. Foster stepped forward. "I've been studying the equipment we captured. Their ships use a very specific type of navigation system. It's accurate in space, but once they enter the atmosphere, they rely on ground-based beacons to guide them to exact landing coordinates." "Could we interfere with those beacons?" Jack asked. Dr. Foster smiled. "Better. We could replace them with our own. Feed them false coordinates." A murmur of excitement spread through the group. For months they had been fighting a defensive war, striking when they could but mostly focused on survival. Now they had a chance to take the initiative. Jack outlined the plan. They would locate and replace the Vecturi landing beacon, then set a trap at the new coordinates. It would be the largest operation any of them had attempted since the invasion began. "We'll need help," Lisa pointed out. "More people than we have here." "That's why I've been in contact with other resistance groups," Jack said. "There's a larger cell operating out of the old military bunker near West Point. They have nearly 100 fighters and more weapons. Between us, we might just pull this off." 2 days later, Jack led a small team to meet with the West Point resistance. They traveled carefully, avoiding roads and open areas where Vecturi patrols might spot them. The journey took twice as long as it would have before the invasion, but they reached the meeting point without incident. Colonel Sam Dawson greeted them at the entrance to the bunker. He was a tall man with a shaved head and a scar running down one side of his face. Captain Miller, he said, shaking Jack's hand firmly. Good to meet someone from the old Earth Defense Force. Likewise, Colonel, Jack replied, though I think military ranks don't mean much these days. Dawson nodded. True enough. We're all just survivors now. He led them inside the bunker, which had been converted into an impressive base of operations. Your message mentioned a plan to disrupt a Vecturi landing. I'm interested. Jack explained Dr. Foster's discovery about the navigation beacons and their plan to redirect a colony ship into a trap. Bold, Dawson said when Jack finished. But I like it. What do you need from us? Fighters, weapons, and any heavy explosives. You can spare, Jack said. We need to make sure that when this ship lands, none of those colonists make it out alive. Dawson studied him for a moment. You know, before all this started, I might have had moral qualms about targeting civilians. But these aren't just civilians, are they? They're the next phase of an invasion. Exactly, Jack said grimly. They're coming to take our planet, to make it their planet. We can't let that happen. Over the next week, the two resistance groups worked together to prepare the operation. Dr. Foster and Rick built a fake navigation beacon that would broadcast the landing coordinates they wanted. Lisa continued monitoring Vecturi communications, gathering intelligence on the colony ship's approach. The ship will enter Earth's atmosphere in 3 days, she reported during their final planning meeting. It's carrying approximately 400 colonists, including their equivalent of children. They also have terraforming equipment designed to alter our environment to suit their biology. Where are they supposed to land? Dawson asked. Lisa pointed to a spot on their map. Here, in this valley. It's been cleared of human settlements and prepared with initial housing structures. And where will we send them instead? Jack asked. Dawson indicated another location. This quarry. It's surrounded by high rock walls on 3 sides. Perfect for an ambush. My people have already begun setting up firing positions and planting explosives. On the night before the operation, Jack couldn't sleep. He sat outside the mine entrance looking up at the stars. Lisa found him there and sat beside him. Having doubts? She asked quietly. Jack sighed. Not about whether this is necessary, but about whether it's enough. Even if we destroy this one ship, they'll send more. One battle at a time, Lisa said. Besides, this isn't just about destroying a ship. It's about sending a message, showing them that Earth isn't the easy conquest. They thought it would be. You're right, Jack nodded. And we've learned something important about the Vecturi. They don't adapt quickly. They follow patterns. They expect us to do the same. That's their weakness, Lisa agreed. They've never encountered a species that fights the way we do. The day of the operation arrived. Teams were positioned around the quarry, hidden among rocks and trees. The fake beacon was activated, broadcasting its false coordinates. All they could do now was wait. At midday they saw it. A massive Vecturi colony ship larger than their warships, descending slowly through the clouds. Its oval shape gleamed in the sunlight as it followed the beacon's signal directly toward the quarry. They don't suspect a thing, Dawson whispered from his position next to Jack. Not even a patrol flyover to check the landing zone first. Overconfidence, Jack replied. They still think they've won. As the huge ship lowered itself into the quarry, settling precisely where they wanted it, Jack raised his hand, ready to give the signal that would trigger the ambush. Hundreds of human fighters watched silently, weapons ready. The Vecturi were about to learn a painful lesson about humanity's refusal to be conquered. The massive Vecturi colony ship settled into the quarry with a low hum. Dust swirled around its landing struts as the engines powered down. Jack watched through binoculars from his position on the ridge. Around him, nearly 200 resistance fighters waited silently among the rocks and trees. Hold, Jack whispered into his radio. Wait until they open the main doors. For several minutes nothing happened. Then with a hiss of escaping air, a seam appeared in the side of the ship. The door slowly lowered to form a ramp. Get ready, Jack said. Remember, aim for the joints in their armor. The first Vecturi appeared in the doorway. Unlike the warriors they had fought before, this one wore minimal armor. Its black exoskeleton gleamed in the sunlight as it looked around the quarry. 2 more aliens joined it, carrying what looked like scanning equipment. "They're checking the atmosphere," Lisa whispered from her position beside Jack. "Standard procedure before letting the colonists out." The scanning team moved down the ramp and began taking readings of the air and ground. They seemed confused, looking back at the ship and then at their surroundings. Jack guessed they were wondering why the landing site didn't match their expected coordinates. "They're starting to suspect something's wrong," Jack said. "Colonel, are your people in position?" "Ready and waiting," Dawson's voice crackled through the radio. More Vecturi emerged from the ship. Some wore the armor of security personnel, but many were clearly civilians. They moved differently than the warriors, with less discipline and more curiosity. A few smaller ones, perhaps their version of children, stayed close to the larger adults. Jack felt a moment of doubt. These weren't soldiers. But then he remembered the burned cities, the millions of humans who had died in the initial invasion, and his resolve hardened. "Now," he said into the radio. The first phase of their attack began with an electromagnetic pulse device that Rick and Dr. Foster had built from captured Vecturi technology. Hidden near the ship, it activated with a high-pitched whine, sending out waves of energy that disrupted the aliens' communications. Confusion spread among the Vecturi as their devices failed. The security personnel formed a protective circle around the civilians, scanning the ridgelines for threats. "Second phase," Jack ordered. Dozens of smoke grenades were launched from hidden positions, filling the quarry with thick chemical smoke. They had discovered months ago that the Vecturi's vision was severely impaired by certain compounds in the smoke, effectively blinding them. Third phase. The resistance fighters opened fire from all sides. They targeted the security personnel, first aiming for the vulnerable joints in their armor. The aliens fell quickly, unable to see their attackers or coordinate a defense. Some of the Vecturi tried to retreat back into the ship, pushing the civilians ahead of them, but Dawson's team had already moved into position to cut off their escape. "Quindi, ship," Jack said to Lisa. "We can't let them seal it and take off." Lisa nodded and activated the signal jammer Rick had built. That should stop them from remotely closing the doors. Jack raised his hand to order the final phase of the attack when something unexpected happened. A group of Vecturi civilians broke away from the main group and ran toward the quarry wall, waving what looked like white cloths. "They're surrendering," Lisa said, surprise in her voice. "Vecturi don't surrender," Jack replied, frowning. "It must be a trick," but the aliens continued their approach, still waving the white cloths. One of them stepped forward and spoke in heavily accented English. "We scientists, not warriors, want peace." Jack hesitated, then raised his hand to hold the attack. "Cover me," he said to Lisa, then stood up from behind his rock. "I'm coming down to talk," he called out. "Any hostile move and my people will open fire." Carefully, Jack made his way down the slope to where the Vecturi waited. Up close, he could see differences between these aliens and the warriors they had fought. Their exoskeletons were lighter in color, almost brown instead of black, and their eyes were larger. "Why should I believe you want peace?" Jack asked when he reached them. The lead alien lowered its head in what might have been a gesture of submission. "We scientists study planets, not want war. Military leaders lie to us." "Say humans welcome us," Jack studied the alien skeptically. "You expect me to believe you didn't know this was an invasion?" "Many not know," the alien insisted. "Told Earth empty of intelligent life. When see truth some object, some punished." It made a cutting motion across its neck that was disturbingly human-like. Before Jack could respond, his radio crackled to life. "Jack, we've got movement on the ridge to the north," Dawson's voice warned. "Looks like a Vecturi response team. They must have detected the ship's distress signal before we jammed." Jack looked at the alien scientist. "Is there anyone else on your ship who thinks like you? Who objects to this invasion?" "Yes. Many. Mostly science team, some ship crew." Making a quick decision, Jack pointed to the ship. "Get them and bring them out. Now, anyone who wants to surrender." The rest will die when we destroy that ship." The alien hesitated, then nodded and hurried back toward the colony vessel, gathering others as it went. "Lisa, come down here," Jack called into his radio. "Bring Mary and Rick, we need to sort this out quickly." Within minutes, about 40 Vecturi civilians had gathered near Jack, separated from the main group. Lisa approached them cautiously. "We need to verify what they're saying," Jack told her. "Use what you've learned of their language, see if they're telling the truth." As Lisa began questioning the aliens, Dawson's voice came through the radio again. "Whatever you're doing down there, hurry it up. The response team is almost here, at least 3 attack ships." Jack made his decision. "Get these cooperating aliens into the mine tunnels," he ordered Mary. "The rest of the plan proceeds as scheduled." As Mary led the surrendering Vecturi away, Jack returned to his position on the ridge. The remaining aliens were still trapped in the quarry, disoriented by the smoke and cut off from escape. "Final phase," Jack ordered into his radio. The explosives they had planted around the quarry detonated in sequence, bringing down tons of rock onto the colony ship and the aliens outside it. At the same time, a barrage of fire from the resistance. Fighters eliminated any survivors. The ground was still shaking when the first Vecturi attack ship appeared overhead. It hovered above the destroyed colony ship, as if unable to comprehend what it was seeing. Then 2 more attack ships joined it, circling the quarry like predatory birds. Jack and his fighters remained hidden, waiting. "They don't know what to do," Lisa whispered. "Their rulebook doesn't have a chapter on this scenario." After several minutes of observation, the attack ships began firing indiscriminately into the rubble and surrounding areas. But the resistance fighters were already retreating through pre-planned escape routes, taking their surrendered prisoners with them. By nightfall, they had reached the safety of the mine complex. The scientist aliens had been separated and were being questioned by Lisa and Dr. Foster. So far, their story seemed consistent. Not all Vecturi supported the invasion, and many civilians had been misled about conditions on Earth. "This changes things," Jack said to Dawson as they watched the questioning. "We might have allies among the enemy." Dawson nodded slowly. "Information is just as valuable as destroyed ships. If these scientists really want to help us, they could tell us everything about Vecturi weaknesses, their command structure, their plans, and send a message back to their homeworld," Lisa added, joining them. "Let them know that Earth isn't the easy conquest their military claimed it would be." Jack looked at the aliens, considering the possibilities. "Today we destroyed 1 colony ship, but with their help, we might be able to do much more." For the first time since the invasion began, Jack felt something he had almost forgotten: hope. 2 months after the quarry ambush, the war against the Vecturi had changed dramatically. The resistance movement had grown from isolated groups into a coordinated global network. Jack sat in what had once been the mine's office, now converted into a command center. Maps covered the walls, marked with Vecturi installations and human resistance strongholds. Kren, the lead Vecturi scientist who had surrendered, entered the room. Over the past weeks, the alien had proven the truth of his claims. He and the other scientist defectors had provided invaluable information about Vecturi technology, biology, and military strategy. "The transmission equipment is ready," Kren said, his English much improved after weeks of practice. "We can send message to my colleagues on Homeworld." Jack nodded. "Good. Lisa is finishing the final draft now." The plan they had developed was bold. Using equipment salvage from the destroyed colony ship, they would send a message directly to the Vecturi homeworld. Not to their military command, but to the scientific community that Kren insisted was increasingly opposed to the invasion. Lisa entered carrying a tablet. "I think we've got it," she said. "Clear, concise, and with enough evidence to be convincing." "Let's hear it," Jack said. Lisa began reading. "To the scientific community of Vecturi Prime, we are the humans of Earth. Your military has told you we are primitive and nearly defeated. This is false. We send this message with the help of your colleagues who have joined our resistance. Attached are files showing the destruction of your colony ships and military installations across our planet. We do not wish to destroy your people, but we will never surrender our world. We propose direct communication to end this conflict before more lives are lost on both sides." "It's good," Jack said when she finished. But will they believe it? Kren's mandibles clicked in what they had learned was a sign of certainty. With evidence files, yes. Scientists value truth. Military kept many facts hidden. This will cause disruption. That's what we're counting on, Jack replied. Enough disruption to buy us time for the next phase. The next phase was already underway. Using information from Kren and the other defectors, resistance groups around the world were targeting specific weaknesses in Vecturi technology. They had discovered that certain human-made electromagnetic pulses could disable their ship's navigation systems. A specific frequency of sound could disrupt their communication networks. Most importantly, they had learned that the Vecturi High Command was located in a single massive ship orbiting Earth. Colonel Dawson entered the command center, followed by Dr. Foster. The strike teams are in position, Dawson reported. Ready? To hit all 6 targets simultaneously. And the capture team? Jack asked. Waiting for the signal. The shuttle is fueled and ready. Jack looked around at the diverse group that now led the human resistance. Scientists and soldiers, civilians who had become warriors, and even aliens who had chosen to side with humanity. It was a far cry from the frightened band of survivors, who had hidden in a cabin after the initial invasion. Let's do it, he said. Send the transmission, then launch the attacks. Lisa and Kren left to operate the communication equipment. Jack turned to the others. We may only get one shot at this. If anything goes wrong, it won't, Dr. Foster interrupted with confidence. The math is solid. The plan is sound. Jack smiled at the scientist's certainty. Then let's go watch humanity take back its planet. They moved to the communications room, where Lisa and Kren were finalizing the transmission. With a nod from Jack, Kren pressed a sequence of controls on the alien device. Lights flashed as the message beamed toward the stars. Now we wait, Lisa said. They didn't have to wait long. Within hours, their monitoring equipment detected unusual activity among the Vecturi ships in orbit. Communication patterns changed. Several ships moved from their standard positions. They received it, Kren said, analyzing the data. There is confusion in the command structure. Perfect time for Phase 2, Jack said and gave the order. Across the globe, resistance teams launched coordinated attacks on key Vecturi installations. Unlike previous guerrilla strikes, these were precisely targeted to cause maximum disruption with minimum force. Power generators were disabled. Communication relays were destroyed. Supply lines were cut. But the most critical mission was happening, in orbit. Using a captured Vecturi shuttle and the access codes provided by the defectors, a small team led by Mary had launched from a hidden facility in the Arctic. Their target, the Vecturi command ship, Jack, Lisa, and the others gathered around the communication equipment, listening to the mission's progress through a secure channel. Approaching target. Mary's voice came through, tense but controlled. No challenges yet. Kren's codes are working. Minutes passed in tense silence. We're in, Mary reported, proceeding to the central command deck. More minutes passed. We have him? Mary's voice finally came through, excitement breaking through her professional tone. Repeat. We have captured the Vecturi High Commander. A cheer erupted in the command center. Jack allowed himself a moment of celebration before focusing again. Get them back here fast, he ordered, before the Vecturi realize what's happened. Over. The next 24 hours, the resistance watched as confusion spread through the Vecturi forces. Without central coordination, their rigid command structure began to falter. Some ships withdrew to defensive positions. Others launched ineffective counterattacks against targets the humans had already abandoned. When the shuttle returned with the captured High Commander, Jack was waiting. The alien was taller than the others, with elaborate markings on its exoskeleton. That signified its rank. It stood defiantly as it was brought before Jack. Your resistance is futile, the commander said in perfect English. The Empire will send more ships, more warriors. Jack smiled coldly. That's what you don't understand. Every ship you send will face the same fate. You fight according to rules. We fight to survive. He gestured to Lisa, who activated a large screen showing live feeds from around the world. Vecturi installations in flames. Alien ships crashed in fields and forests. resistance fighters moving freely through areas that had once been under enemy control. And now, Jack continued, your scientists on your homeworld have seen the truth. Your civilians know this isn't the easy conquest you promised them. How long before they question why so many are dying for a planet they don't need? For the first time, the commander seemed uncertain. We offer you a choice, Jack said. A negotiated withdrawal from Earth or a war that will cost you more than you ever imagined. We're not the primitives you thought we were. We're humans. We've spent our entire history fighting against stronger enemies and surviving against impossible odds. The alien was silent for a long moment. Then it spoke, its voice quieter than before. The Empire has never retreated. Then the Empire has never faced humans before, Jack replied simply. 3 days later, the first Vecturi ships began to leave Earth's orbit. Within weeks, alien installations around the world were being abandoned. The invasion that was supposed to be over in days had been defeated by a species that refused to surrender. Standing on a hillside watching Vecturi ships ascending into the evening sky, Jack felt Lisa's hand slip into his. Do you think they'll come back? She asked. Jack shook his head. I don't think so. They're a logical species. And logically, Earth simply isn't worth the cost. We should thank them, in a way, Lisa said thoughtfully. Thank them? For killing millions of our people? No, for teaching us something important. She looked up at the stars where the alien ships were disappearing. They showed us that despite all our differences, all our divisions, humanity can still unite when it matters most. Jack considered this, then nodded. Maybe the next aliens who find Earth will come in true peace, and if they don't, he smiled grimly. Well, we'll be ready. As night fell over an Earth that remained firmly in human hands, resistance groups around the world celebrated their victory. The Vecturi had come expecting an easy conquest. Instead, they had walked into a human ambush and never stood a chance.